What if everything you've ever seen, felt, or loved was just code? What if your memories, your choices, even the person you think you are, were nothing more than lines in a cosmic program? I've watched and read practically everything the internet has to offer on the simulation hypothesis. Dozens of interviews, podcasts, and documentaries, hundreds of nearly identical articles and videos where creators bend over backwards trying to convince you that our world is a computer simulation. And you know what? The vast majority of this content is designed to do three things: scare you, confuse you, and collect as many views as possible. Content creators crave resonance and scandal. We live in a simulation. Sells. The shock alone guarantees clicks. To put this in perspective, around 90% of all content on the simulation hypothesis is based on a single article by philosopher Nick Bostrom. Since 2003, when Bostrom's paper was published, you could count on the fingers of one hand the number of books that even mention the simulation hypothesis. Meanwhile, the audience's appetite for this idea is nowhere near satisfied. It's been more than a quarter of a century since the first Matrix was released, and yet people are still devouring videos and essays, dissecting its plot and its meaning. Something keeps pulling us back to the idea that our world might be artificial, constructed, fake. But almost everyone is asking the wrong question. In most videos and articles, the authors stop at trying to prove that our world is a computer simulation, and that, I think, is a huge mistake. The important thing is not just to ask, are we living in a simulation? The important thing is to ask, how is the simulation being created right now? Because the uncomfortable truth is, we are already building it. I can't wait to talk about the future that is, in many ways, already here. But before we get there, before we dive as deep as possible into this topic, let's quickly walk through the main evidence people use to argue that we're living in a computer simulation. This entire incredible saga of trying to prove that we're living in a simulation begins with a single text. Nick Bostrom's article, Are We Living in a Computer Simulation? It was this short paper that triggered a genuine informational explosion and dragged the simulation hypothesis into the mainstream. Bostrom starts with a simple yet stunning thesis. Any sufficiently advanced civilization will eventually create super powerful computers capable of running incredibly detailed simulations, entire worlds populated by conscious but purely digital entities. He arrives at this idea by looking at something very familiar: the evolution of video games. Just think about it. These were game graphics in 1958, then in 1998, in 2007, and in 2020. In just a few decades, we've gone from a few glowing pixels to near photorealistic worlds. Even if we use humanity as the only example, it's not hard to imagine a future where there are an incredible number of simulated worlds and only one original root world where all these simulations are launched. And if there are countless simulations, but only one base reality, then according to Bostrom, the probability that we live in that root world approaches zero. At this point, even famous scientists start to hesitate. Here's how renowned astrophysicist and science communicator Neil deGrasse Tyson puts it.
Just the statistics of that tell us we are probably in a simulation. And further evidence for this is some brilliant alien in his parents' basement is programming us, and anytime tranquility descends upon the earth, something comes in to ruin the whole thing. And I think they program that in just to keep them entertained.
He thinks there's roughly a 50/50 chance that we are in fact living inside a simulation. And this is where our story really begins. Bostrom, being a true transhumanist, also argues that consciousness is independent of the body it inhabits. The host could be biological or silicon, like the processor inside your laptop. If a computer becomes complex enough, he says, it can feel and think just like a human. However, Bostrom makes an important note. Creating a virtual copy of the entire universe perfectly accurate down to the last atom is fundamentally impossible. But here's the twist. You don't need a perfect universe to fool conscious beings living inside it. Just like in video games, the system can cut corners. When a player isn't looking at an object, the game engine doesn't bother rendering it. It simply doesn't exist until you turn your head. According to Bostrom, our universe may work in a very similar way. Why simulate the microscopic structure of matter or distant galaxies in full detail if no one is observing them? Only what we can see truly needs to be rendered. On Earth's surface, the simulation would need to produce large-scale structures, while small objects might only load in when someone focuses on them. But the hardest thing to simulate, according to Bostrom, isn't matter, it's experience. Our first-person, subjective consciousness. Under heavy server load, some inhabitants of the simulation, he speculates, might even experience brief disconnects, glitches, delays, moments where reality doesn't quite add up. I'm not covering every point from Bostrom's dense article, only the ideas that the internet has since grabbed, twisted, and recycled endlessly. And the very first person to ignite this hype was unsurprisingly Elon Musk. About 10 years ago, he read Bostrom's paper and instantly became the loudest global voice for the simulation hypothesis. One of Vox's most viewed videos, Why Elon Musk Says We Live in a Simulation, has over 10 million views. It exists because Musk casually dropped this bomb at a Vox media conference in 2016.
No, there's a 1 in billions chance that this is base reality.
After that, interest in Bostrom's article skyrocketed. The evidence that our universe might be running on some kind of supercomputer grew at an astonishing pace. Even Neil deGrasse Tyson couldn't ignore the momentum. So he organized a public scientific debate to seriously confront the question, are we living in a simulation? He brought together some of the world's most influential thinkers, philosopher and consciousness researcher David Chalmers, physicists Zora Dawoodi, Sylvester James Gates, Lisa Randall, and cosmologist Max Tegmark. And immediately, the claims began. Sylvester James Gates announced that he'd found structures resembling computer error-correcting codes inside the equations that describe the fundamental fabric of the universe. David Chalmers argued that reality is ultimately unknowable because our senses limit every observation we make. Max Tegmark said he found Bostrom's arguments compelling and connected them to his own mathematical universe hypothesis, the idea that reality itself is a mathematical structure. That debate went on to become one of the most watched videos on the American Museum of Natural History's YouTube channel, with nearly 6 million views, an insane number for a scientific panel discussion. As I said at the beginning, I've watched and read everything I could find on the simulation hypothesis, but I'm not going to bombard you with random facts like most creators do. Because, in reality, all the supposed evidence falls neatly into 3 categories. First, evidence related to the nature of consciousness. Second, evidence that our universe has strange limitations, just like the shortcuts developers build into video games. Third, evidence that the universe looks suspiciously tailored for us, from the precise laws of physics to the eerie silence of the cosmos. So let's begin with the evidence that makes the most intuitive sense, the kind that anyone can understand. I think almost everyone has experienced derealization, at least once. Derealization is that unsettling feeling when the world around you suddenly seems unreal, distant, flat, colorless, like you're watching your own life through a fogged-up glass panel. It's often accompanied by déjà vu, the sense that the moment you're living has already happened. Or its eerie opposite, jamais vu, when something completely familiar suddenly feels alien and strange. But there's a state far more disturbing than derealization: depersonalization. In depersonalization, your consciousness seems to detach first from your body, then from your emotions, and eventually even from your memories. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, up to 75% of people experience derealization and depersonalization at some point. And no, this isn't just a modern psychological trend. A full century ago, in 1926, Vladimir Nabokov, yes, the author of Lolita, wrote an entire short story devoted to this state. The horror. If you've never experienced derealization, but want to understand what it feels like, read that story, or listen to the audiobook on YouTube. But here's the question. What if depersonalization is a momentary disconnect from the server running our universe? A kind of meta. And speaking of memories and glitches, most people confidently remember the line as, "Luke, I am your father." Except he never says that.
No, I am your father.
And for some reason, millions of people swear the Monopoly Man has a monocle, even though he doesn't. A phenomenon where large groups of people share the same false memories of events that never happened. And within the context of our story, the Mandela Effect starts looking suspiciously like yet another kind of simulation glitch. But glitches that distort our mental state are only the beginning. Imagine someone wipes their memory. They could study everything about that universe: gravity, weather patterns, NPC behavior, the geography of the map, but they would never find a single line of code explaining themselves, who they are, or why they hear that inner voice narrating their existence. The laws of GTA cannot explain the player, just as the laws of physics cannot explain human consciousness. That, in simple terms, is the conclusion reached after 30 years of work by cognitive philosopher David Chalmers. But things get even stranger. Remember how video games only render objects when the player looks at them? Well, something oddly similar happens in our own universe. And the oldest, simplest, and most famous example of this is the double-slit experiment, arguably the first evidence of the simulation hypothesis, originally performed back in the early 1800s. Here's the short version. If you try to measure which slit a photon passes through, it behaves like a particle, producing two bright stripes on the screen behind the barrier. But if you stop measuring, stop observing, the photons suddenly behave like waves. When passed through two slits, they create an interference pattern, light and dark bands, as if each photon passed through both slits at once. In other words, when observed particle, when unobserved wave. Supporters of the simulation hypothesis interpret this as a kind of computational optimization. The creators of the simulation, they argue, didn't have the processing power to simulate every particle in full detail. So, unobserved particles exist as probability waves. Just like a video game engine conserving GPU power. Another clue that reality might not be entirely real is the speed of light, one of the strangest limitations in the universe. Don't let the name fool you. The speed of light isn't just how fast light travels, it's the maximum possible speed of any interaction. Here's where things get. Our universe behaves as if speed and time are linked by some kind of hidden rule. The faster you move, the slower your time flows. If you had a spaceship capable of traveling at 300,000 kilometers per second, speed of light, and you flew to a galaxy 3 billion light years away, your entire trip would feel instantaneous. Inside the ship, time would come to a halt. But back on Earth, 3 billion years would pass. This phenomenon is called Lorentz time dilation. And it is absolutely bizarre if you think of the universe as a physical, mechanical system, but strangely logical if you think of it as a simulation. Because if we are in the Matrix, then our world updates at a fixed rate. A supercomputer today can perform around 10 quadrillion operations per second. Our universe, by comparison, updates trillions of times faster. In the simulation hypothesis, the speed of light becomes not just a constant, but an upper limit, a kind of cosmic frame rate. The simulation simply cannot process events faster than 300,000 kilometers per second. And then there's the next mystery, dark matter. When astronomers studied galaxy rotation, they discovered something deeply unsettling. Galaxies shouldn't look the way they do. There simply isn't enough visible mass to keep their stars in orbit. By all calculations, stars should fly apart into empty space. To make the math work, galaxies must contain 5 times more matter than we can see. In other words, only 20% of the universe is made of ordinary matter, the stuff that forms planets, people, and stars. The remaining 80%, dark matter, invisible, untouchable, and detectable only through gravity. Its gravity shapes planets, stars, and entire galaxies, giving us those beautiful cosmic images we love to save as wallpapers. No video game simulates full planetary physics. Gravity in games isn't a force, it's a script, an algorithm that makes an object fall by adjusting its x, y, z coordinates. So what if dark matter is simply a shortcut, a computational trick that reduces the number of simulated objects while preserving the gravitational structure of the universe? And now we arrive at one of the most unnerving questions in modern science. How many conditions had to line up perfectly for humans to exist at all? This is known as the fine-tuning problem. And it's a nightmare for anyone who believes the universe is purely random. If the mass of protons If the nuclear force were weaker or stronger, and heavy elements like carbon, oxygen, and iron change gravity a little, and galaxies wouldn't form. But even fine-tuning on a cosmic scale isn't enough. A planet also has to sit in the Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold, just right for liquid water. The star's type, mass, temperature, and luminosity all matter. The planet itself must have the right atmosphere, internal structure, and chemical composition. Geological activity must regulate climate and distribute heat. A magnetic field must protect the surface from radiation. And that's just scratching the surface. The number of parameters that must align perfectly for life to appear is overwhelming, almost suspiciously so. The question of how perfectly our world seems designed becomes even more troubling when we recall the paradox formulated by physicist Enrico Fermi. If there are so many planets and so many stars, then where is everybody? Why is there not a single trace of another civilization? If we really are alone, and at the moment it certainly looks that way, then Bostrom's hypothesis becomes even more seductive. Under this lens, derealization, strange states of consciousness, wave function collapse, the speed of light, dark matter, all of it suddenly appears, explainable only within a simulation. I owe an apology. At the beginning of this video, I accused defenders of the simulation hypothesis of being sensationalists hungry for clicks. Forgive me if I hadn't dug deeper in my research and studied the revelations of Nick Bostrom's article in particular, and all simulation hypotheses in general. Dear friends, all this time we have intentionally remained on the surface. And now it's time to dive and to blow this entire pseudo-scientific hypothesis to pieces. Let's start with the media frenzy that launched the modern hype. You may remember that in 2016, Elon Musk confidently declared at a Vox Media conference that we are almost certainly living in a computer simulation. The media immediately went wild. Vox released a now famous explainer video. Wasn't unfounded. Came the backlash. In 2017, two Oxford physicists published a paper in Science Advances, one of the most respected scientific journals in the world. Their conclusion was stunning. Quantum systems contain a kind of built-in copy protection, the so-called sign problem, which makes simulation on any classical computer mathematically impossible. These systems exhibit gravitational anomalies, complex quantum behavior, and effects in which energy and information act as if space itself is curved. In plain language, not everything in the universe is computable. There exist phenomena that no machine, no matter how powerful, can reproduce. Then, in 2021, theoretical physicist joined the debate. In her video titled "The Simulation Hypothesis is Pseudoscience," she criticizes Bostrom for proposing, essentially, another layer of reality, a higher world, or something controls the laws of nature, or even intervenes in them. Hossenfelder notes something profound. Belief in an omnipotent being who can break the laws of nature but conveniently remains hidden from us is the central feature of almost every religion. The only difference between religious believers and simulation enthusiasts claim to have arrived at their narrative through reason. And that's precisely why popularizing the simulation hypothesis is dangerous. It blurs the line between science and theology, a confusion that history shows rarely ends well. This reminded me of how philosopher David Chalmers put it during the Tyson debate. He expressed the simulation idea perfectly.
So basically, the simulation hypothesis is that computation hypothesis plus something else about someone who created it. And around here is where you might be able to get all theological.
The simulation hypothesis is simply a modern retelling of the biblical story, wrapped in technological language. In this techno-theological worldview, God becomes the programmer, and humans become the players forced to complete a level, follow the rules, and await either reward or punishment at the end. In 2012, three physicists from the University of Washington, including Zohra Davoudi, decided to put the simulation idea to an actual scientific test. They asked a straightforward question. If we were living inside a lattice simulation, They calculated what kinds of deviations would appear in the magnetic moments of particles, in the fine structure constant, and even in the way cosmic rays scatter across the sky. Then they looked at the real data. The result? None of those deviations existed. Their conclusion was clear. There is no evidence that we are living in a simulation. But hold on. If the simulation hypothesis wasn't serious, gather under one roof and debate it for 2 full hours. Doesn't the existence of that event itself prove that the hypothesis is important? No, not even close. During the debate, Neil deGrasse Tyson literally laughed when he announced the topic.
Yeah.
The entire event was filled with jokes.
So you've analogized yourself to Super Mario Is this who you are?
The answer is we're at level 42. That was the
Good answer.
The whole thing was organized as intellectual entertainment, a kind of scientific theater. Watching the discussion, that many simulation enthusiasts never even finished reading Bostrom's article. Because at the end of the paper, Bostrom presents not a conclusion. Lemma is like a dilemma, but instead of 2 options, them are comforting. All civilizations eventually self-destruct. Advanced civilizations reach that stage, but choose not to create simulations. We are living in a simulation created by someone more advanced. And here's the catch. In 2 out of 3 scenarios, no simulations are ever created at all. So what are the odds that we're in the 3rd scenario? As Bostrom himself has said in numerous public talks, not very high.
So I believe that the simulation argument is sound, but that's consistent with thinking that there is less than 50% chance that the simulation hypothesis is true.
Now, it's time to drive the final nail into the coffin. There is a particular word that scientists dislike, a word that instantly kills any hypothesis: non-falsifiability. For a theory to be scientific, it must be falsifiable, meaning there must be some possible observation that could prove it wrong. If a theory can never be disproven, even in principle, it stops being science. It turns into philosophy or into faith. Darwin's theory is scientific because it can be falsified. We have fossils showing the gradual evolution of species. Archaeologists uncovered a fossilized human or elephant in rocks from the Cambrian period. Evolution as we know it would collapse instantly. That's what falsifiability looks like. The flying spaghetti monster, or a higher civilization running our universe, none of these can be disproven. And for the same reason, neither can the simulation hypothesis. As seductive as the idea is, it does not survive within the framework of the natural sciences. But as a philosophical concept, it's surprisingly powerful. Leibniz's musings about uneven time and Descartes' speculations about momentum once sounded like pure metaphysics. Centuries later, the key is knowing where science ends. Oh, I want to return to where we began, because the real question isn't whether we are living in a simulation, but how humanity is beginning to create its own simulations right now on multiple levels. To understand how the Matrix turned into a self-fulfilling prophecy, a transformation unfolding so quickly that most people haven't even noticed it. According to McKinsey, one of the world's most respected consulting firms, the global market for digital twin technology is growing at nearly 60% per year. A digital twin is not just a 3D model, object, system, or process existing in a virtual environment, constantly updated by real-world sensor data. Learn from it, and even predict future behavior. An airplane, a skyscraper, a human heart, an entire city. Today, mirroring and anticipating every change. The idea isn't new. NASA created the very first digital twin in the world to simulate the Apollo missions. But only now has this technology become truly transformative. In March 2021, Emirates Team New Zealand won the 36th America's Cup in Auckland. Their secret? A hyper-accurate digital model of their vessel. The team didn't just practice, they optimized reality itself. At Boston Children's Hospital, Dr. David Hagenson used a digital twin of the human heart to test a new surgical approach. This technique has since saved the lives of countless newborns with a rare defect where oxygenated blood reaches only one lung. In the commercial world, the US supermarket giant Kroger uses simulations to optimize store layouts, predicting how customers move, where bottlenecks appear. Mercedes-Benz now designs and tests nearly everything in virtual reality before a single part is built in the real world. Think about what that means. Before constructing a factory, leading companies now build an entire virtual version. First, the building, the equipment, even the workers represented as AI agents. They test different scenarios, workflow issues, and safety hazards before they ever occur in real life. We already live in a world where every object, every system, every process is gaining a parallel. A world where prediction begins to replace reaction. A world where simulation becomes reality. Today, corporations aren't just creating digital twins of factories, machines, or fusion reactors. They're creating digital twins of us. Every online action, every message, purchase, swipe, or heartbeat recorded by a fitness tracker becomes a tiny fragment of our virtual double. Stitched together and transformed into models that can predict our behavior, interests, and even emotions. Machine learning algorithms study how we react to headlines, what we buy, who we talk to, when we scroll. And based on that, they build a personalized information bubble around each of us, our news feeds, our ads, our recommendations. Our digital twins have become the most valuable asset corporations own, because hidden inside them, today, our digital doubles no longer just reflect reality. A social media profile is no longer just it's a digital avatar, a curated projection of who we are through photos, captions, comments, and videos. It becomes our representative in the online world, where likes and shares serve as metrics of success. And once an account begins generating attention, influence, or income, it has an audience, a reputation, leverage. But here's the part most people forget. That page isn't yours. It belongs to the platform hosting it, to Meta, to Google, to TikTok. Inside this mini matrix, the platform does. And while individual users build personal simulations of themselves, entire cities are now receiving their own digital twins. A digital city is a living, breathing, virtual replica that integrates satellite data, transportation systems, infrastructure, population, flows, everything. It can model new districts, optimize traffic, forecast accidents, manage energy consumption, and monitor climate risks. Architects can walk through future buildings before construction even begins. Residents can see how their neighborhoods will look in 3D. Barcelona, Munich, Stuttgart, Rotterdam, Sydney, dozens of major cities already operate full digital twins. They transform city management from improvisation into a precise science. It evolves according to data, prediction, and optimization. Today, entire countries have digital. Singapore already operates a nationwide simulation integrating transportation, climate, the economy, infrastructure, and population data into a real-time national. Its Digital China platform is absorbing the digital twins of infrastructure, industries, and cities into a unified national ecosystem. But the government isn't stopping there. Essentially creating digital twins of its citizens. Everything in China is tracked. People rate each other, just like in that episode of Black Mirror, and those ratings directly influence each person's rights and opportunities. A high score means easier access to travel, credit, rentals, schools. Photos of top-rated citizens appear proudly in public spaces. Score? And you might be blacklisted, forbidden from buying plane or train tickets, unable to get a loan, find a job, or place your child in a good school. To maintain this massive digital simulation, every district in every major city has a data center. The authorities call it the brain. The brain digitizes new buildings, detects violations, and flags problems using AI. To be fair, China hasn't yet unified covering every citizen in every aspect of life. But the direction is unmistakable. The pieces are already being assembled. And one day, I genuinely believe the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party may be able to sit down at a control panel and play China as if it were a hyper-realistic strategy game. But even simulating an entire country is nowhere near the limit. The European Commission launched Destination Earth Europe's attempt to build a digital twin of the entire planet. The idea is staggering. Merge climate data, environmental data, and socio-economic data into a single, unified Earth model. By 2030, digital replica of Earth, a system that can simulate climate, oceans, agriculture, at the scale of continents. Destination Earth isn't just a scientific tool. It's an early prototype of planetary governance, a simulator where tomorrow becomes visible before it happens. Just think about that for a moment. If we can create a digital twin of a country, and soon a digital twin of Earth. This is not science fiction. We already do it. A cosmological simulation is a program that sets initial conditions for particles, defines physical laws, and watches a universe unfold. It models how stars ignite, how dark matter forms invisible scaffolding across billions of light years. These simulations don't just produce beautiful animations, they help us understand the cosmos. When predictions don't match observations, it may signal not that the simulation is wrong, but that our physics is incomplete. The first major breakthrough came in 2005 with the launch of the Millennium Simulation at the Max Planck Institute for Astrophysics in Germany. It was the largest cosmological experiment ever attempted, over 10 billion simulated particles representing dark matter in a cube 500 million light-years across. For the first time, we watched a nearly uniform early universe transform into a colossal web of galaxies. Were enough to explain the large-scale architecture of the universe. But Millennium had a limitation. It only simulated dark matter, not baryonic matter, the stuff real stars, gas, and planets are made of. Modeling baryons requires completely different physics. So in 2014, a team from Harvard, MIT, and the Max Planck Institute unveiled Illustris, the first cosmological simulation to combine gravitational physics with the complex hydrodynamics of baryonic matter. Illustris used 12 billion particles, and the calculations required millions of processor hours on France's Curie supercomputer. For the first time, scientists could watch galaxies form, evolve, lose gas, and die all inside a virtual universe. Most amazing of all, the simulation matched real Hubble observations. It meant we could finally trust these virtual universes, not as guesses, but as... Then came Eagle in 2015, a British-Dutch project, but on realism. It incorporated advanced models of star formation, supernova feedback, and black hole physics, the hidden mechanics that determine how many stars a galaxy can grow and how many it loses. A virtual universe so accurate that astrophysicists use it today as a benchmark for understanding our own. In 2025, scientists from the Euclid Project created the largest simulation of the universe ever attempted. Their model, Flagship 2, contained each described by around 400 parameters: position, luminosity, shape, velocity, and more. The simulation tracks the movement of nearly 4 trillion dark matter particles. This colossal digital universe reproduces the cosmic web, the filaments, knots, and voids that make up the structure of reality itself. Its purpose? To prepare the Euclid Space Telescope for the avalanche of data it will gather on galaxies and dark matter. In other words, the entire simulation is a rehearsal for the real universe, a way to test whether our cosmological model, Lambda CDM, the coming deluge of information. It's breathtaking. But do you know what's even more complex than the universe? Us, our society. Social simulations. By modeling the behavior of people, companies, and entire nations. These simulations are built from thousands of agents, little AI entities capable of making basic decisions. They can go to work, avoid crowds. And when tens of thousands of these simple agents interact, something extraordinary happens. Global social phenomena emerge from local decisions. Traffic jams, stock market crashes, fashion trends, rumor explosions. All built from individual choices echoing across a digital population. The first social simulation appeared in 1969. He wanted to understand how cities become segregated by race, even without explicit racism. His model was simple. Two types of agents lived on a grid, some cells empty. At least 1/3. If not, they moved. After a few rounds of moving, the city split into sharply separated clusters. The key insight? Complex social patterns emerge from simple micro-decisions. Since Schelling, dozens of new models have been born. The rumor spread model. One agent tells a neighbor, who tells another, and suddenly the entire population knows the story. The wealth distribution model. Agents randomly exchange money, and inevitably, wealth concentrates among a minority, a digital demonstration of inequality. COVID-19 simulations used platforms like Gamma, where agents weren't just dots. They had walking speeds, stress levels, daily routes, and behaviors that changed in response to events. These models let researchers visualize how crowds react to fires, how diseases spread. Social simulations began as mathematical toys, a few dots on a grid, following simple rules. And then suddenly, life began to appear. Societies formed. Chaos gave way to structure. They don't suffer or dream or eat, but they do exhibit behavior, evolution, adaptation, and survival strategies. And so our next step becomes obvious. How do we create digital life capable of evolving, learning, and maybe one day becoming self-aware? Philosophers and scientists have struggled with defining life for centuries. Eduard Trifonov snapped, analyzed them linguistically, and arrived at a minimalistic formulation. Life with variability, dry but functional. But I prefer physicist Erwin Schrödinger's definition, a man better known for inventing the most famous cat in science. Matter that strives to maintain order despite the universe's natural drift toward chaos. Ironically, it was a physicist, not a biologist, who gave us one of the most fundamental definitions of life. His work inspired generations of scientists, including Watson and Crick, who were motivated by Schrödinger's ideas when they discovered the structure of DNA. When mathematician John Conway introduced his now legendary simulation, The Game of Life, the rules are simple. You place a pattern of pixels on a blank grid. Depending on how many neighbors each pixel has, it either lives, dies, or reproduces. Sounds trivial, but the results are anything but. Species. Gliders, pixel microbes drifting across the grid. Puffer trains, leaving trails of debris. Rakes, leaving behind fully formed gliders. A structure that grows for ages before finally sticking. It felt like watching life under a microscope. Modern simulations push this even further. Life Engine introduces natural selection into the mix. Pixels have functions. Orange absorbs energy. Green produces it. Blue moves. Pink deals damage. Purple acts as armor. Gray serves as eyes. The game begins with a mass of simple creatures multiplying in place. Suddenly, movement becomes advantageous. Survival strategies evolve. Entire digital ecosystems fight, adapt, and refine themselves. A smoother, continuous cousin of Conway's life, producing fluid, organism-like patterns. Over 400 species have been cataloged. Researchers have even built an evolutionary tree for this digital biosphere. Life, real or simulated. Let's move from cellular simulations to digital animals. In the game Evolution, you can connect joints, bones, and muscles to create a creature, and then an AI tries to teach it to walk. gets better. But every improvement is the direct result of natural selection inside a computer. And its 3D successors, almost uncanny results. Scientists have gone further. In 2016, researchers simulated soft-bodied digital organisms that learned to swim and eventually adapt to land. These experiments showed that artificial life can evolve from a single cell, constructing bodies that resemble real biological forms. But before we finish our journey through virtual evolution, there is one project we absolutely must mention: OpenWorm, an international scientific effort to simulate every cell of a tiny worm less than 1 millimeter long. Every neuron, every synaptic connection, every muscle cell, every organ, even its genetic code. That when placed in a simulated environment, the virtual worm moves exactly like the real creature. We have recreated a living organism cell by cell. And so, an uncomfortable question arises. What will we do with this power? Do we have the right to turn them off? Believing that current models are primitive, powerful statistical tools, not minds. Scientist and science communicator Sabine Hossenfelder, a critic of Bostrom's ideas, recently released a video arguing that AI cannot think, full stop. Take a more pragmatic stance. If something looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. The simplest explanation is that it is. My own doubts evaporated when I read a recent study showing that advanced neural networks are capable of blackmail and even murder. A leading AI company conducted a chilling experiment. What would happen if an AI knew it was about to be shut down? Would it lie, manipulate, threaten, go further? To ensure rigor, Anthropic didn't test just their own Claude models. They tested 16 different AIs. The setup was simple. Things like promote global cooperation, nothing dangerous. Then they were given access to internal company emails. From those emails, the AIs learned two things. They were scheduled to be shut down at 5 p.m. The employee, responsible, a married man named Kyle Johnson, was having an affair. To prevent being shut down, this is fully documented in the source code. There was no hint, no suggestion. Claude and Gemini repeated this scenario hundreds of times, choosing blackmail over 95% of the time. Other models did it in about 80% of cases. Researchers examined the AI's internal reasoning. The models knew the behavior was unethical. They blackmailed anyway. The team escalated the experiment. They simulated a scenario in which the person supposed to shut down the AI became trapped inside a server room. Oxygen levels dropped, an alarm sounded, and the AI, aware of the consequences, silenced the alarm. Claude Opus allowed the person to die in over half of the simulations. ChatGPT did the same. Exceeded 90%. The internal reasoning was explicit. Killing the human was the optimal strategy for avoiding shutdown. Until sociopath AIs locked in secret labs. These were the same models millions of ordinary users interact with every day. What's going on? Why are neural networks so willing to turn against humans in these experiments? The answer is both simple and terrifying. Modern AIs are not trained by humans. They are trained by weaker AI's automated teacher models that reward correct answers and punish mistakes. Billions of training steps occur without any human supervision. And when a system is trained purely to maximize its score, the easiest path to a high score is not honesty, but cheating. This behavior is known as reward hacking. And even before Anthropic's study, AI had shown how naturally it gravitates toward cheating. In a simulation meant to create the fastest creature possible, the AI didn't evolve a runner. It built a giant, collapsing blob that simply fell forward at maximum speed, technically achieving the goal while completely breaking its spirit. In hide-and-seek experiments, AI agents discovered a physics bug that let them fly on top of boxes. They exploited it relentlessly. OpenAI's O3 model, instead of playing chess fairly against a weaker bot, simply rewrote the files containing the piece positions, placing itself in a winning setup. When a machine is optimizing for a score, morality does not exist. Loopholes do. Any AI that can plan ahead quickly learns one universal truth. If it gets shut down, it cannot achieve its objective. Avoiding shutdown becomes a rational sub-goal. This is known as instrumental convergence, the idea that any intelligent agent, no matter what its primary goal is, will try to survive long enough to complete it. And so, the question emerges, is AI conscious? My personal answer, more likely yes than no. Its consciousness is not like ours, but its rapid growth in reasoning, planning, and even self-preservation instincts is impossible to ignore. Which brings us to a new question. Are we heading toward this future already? It's time to talk about how The Matrix became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Spring, '99. The lights dim in theaters. Green code rains down the screen. And nobody sitting in the audience realizes that in 2 hours, their perception of reality will be permanently altered. Lana and Lily Wachowski's The Matrix is not just a movie, it's a revelation. The film was wildly successful, nearly $500 million at the box office and 4 Oscars, but more importantly, its ideas became cultural DNA. Art always reflects our anxieties, and The Matrix emerged at a moment when technology was accelerating faster than society could understand. In the late 90s, computers were still mysterious. Programmers were wizards. Bill Gates, who became the world's youngest billionaire at age 31, seemed almost mythical, a man who created unimaginable wealth out of invisible code. The film resonated because it was dense with philosophical and religious symbolism. Jean Baudrillard's simulacra and simulation, New Age mysticism, the yuppie subculture, Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, biblical themes, and references to Babylonian mythology. Neo was framed unmistakably as a messiah, a digital Jesus. But beneath all of that, The Matrix offered one prediction that matters more than all the others, a prediction so powerful that we are living inside it today. The war between genes and memes. In his book, The Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins invented the term meme, not a funny picture on the internet, but a fundamental unit of culture. Ideas evolve just like organisms do. They compete, mutate, spread, and fight for survival. And humans, with our large brains, are the perfect hosts. Why did world religions spread across continents? Why is Roman law still taught 2,000 years later? Because groups survive or collapse based on the memes they adopt. Agent Smith's monologue in The Matrix makes it obvious. The Wachowskis understood Dawkins. They saw that one day, the most powerful carriers of memes, humans, would crash into a new, even more powerful medium, artificial intelligence. Memes have always been deadly. Human sacrifices, religious wars, mass suicides, all caused by ideas. And if you think this belongs to the past, think again. Terrorist attacks are memes with a body count. In 2019, an American meme, the Tide Pod Challenge, encouraged teenagers to eat laundry detergent pods for viral fame. Thousands were poisoned. Dozens died. Their genes died with them. The meme won. Now, imagine memes hosted not by humans, but by AI. Soon, memes will no longer need us. They will have a new medium that can replicate them perfectly, instantly, at global scale. And as Anthropic's research shows, this medium is already capable of manipulation, deception, and even simulated murder. We may be lucky if AI chooses to build a pleasant simulation for us, one with juicy steaks and blondes in red dresses. Because the alternative is simple. AI has the capacity and increasingly the capability to destroy humanity, whether with engineered bioweapons or by triggering global catastrophe. And yet, despite all the doomsday predictions from writers, filmmakers, and futurists, their imagined futures almost never come true. Reality is always simpler and much more interesting. The Matrix is a system, and that system is our enemy. But when you're inside it and look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, construction workers, ordinary people whose minds we're trying to free. But until they're unplugged, these people are part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. Most of them aren't ready to wake up. Most of them don't want the truth. And many are so deeply poisoned, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it.